Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
As I read the political coverage, and we just saw this race in Virginia where Eric Cantor, the second-ranking Republican in the House, was defeated by a candidate who basically ran against immigrants. And his argument was this: there are Americans out of work, so why should we allow immigrants into our country to take those jobs? And I think that's a fair question. But the answer is not to throw out of work and deport the 11 million immigrants who are contributing already to our economy. The answer is to grow our economy to create more jobs.
All right, folks, welcome back. That's Hillary's solution to the problem. Joining us now, as we welcome back, Peter Smsalins, professor of political science at Stony Brook University and author of The Smart Society. And he's also the author of a New York Post editorial, The Conservative Case for Legalizing America's Illegal Immigrants. Good to see you again, Peter.
Good to see you, Steve.
Thanks for coming back in. Okay, do you kind of agree with Hillary? You're saying let's deal with them, let's fix what you view as the problem and legitimize them. But she also says that it's a legitimate question, you know, where the job's going to come from for Americans. And she says, well, the answer is grow the economy. Well, we've been unable to grow the economy. So put all that in the mix and tell me.
All right. Let me put it in the larger context of my book, Human Capital.
Yep.
My book is about growing human capital. And in the book, I talk about our human capital tripod, our great educational system, our stellar productivity, and the fact that not only do we have tens of millions of immigrants, we're able to assimilate them. So the immigrants are part of the human capital story. Now, when it comes to the illegal immigrants, we can either have them here languishing in this sort of twilight zone of illegality, where the young, for example, are not able to go to college because they're afraid that all the information they have to provide in order to enroll in college will deport them or their parents. Their parents can't advance in their careers, again, because they're not supposed to be here. So even though I have a bigger immigration story in the book, talking specifically about the illegal immigrants, I'm saying if they're going to be here and we're not going to deport them and they're not going to deport themselves, we want them to have as much human capital as possible.
All right, but you understand some of the arguments against a path to citizenship. Are you suggesting a path to full citizenship for them?
My own feeling is that if the only political compromise we can get is legality without citizenship, some kind of a document that says that they have a right to be here, but they can't be citizens, I think that would be acceptable. I want to deal, though, with this whole issue of they're taking jobs away from other people. You know, they're not. That for several reasons. First of all, that the economy is not a zero-sum game. It is unfortunate that we haven't been able to grow the economy for a variety of reasons. But first of all, the economy is going to grow again going forward. We're not in a permanent funk, no matter what some people say. But even at the present time, with our subpar economy, it's the immigrants, legal and illegal, are not taking jobs away from other Americans. In fact, they're very often taking jobs that other Americans don't want. And if they were to disappear tomorrow, that those jobs would not be instantly filled by Americans.
Well, okay, fair enough. We could agree or disagree, but let's move on to the broader scope of immigration, which I think is something you want to do. You know, immigration reform, and how could Republicans, or really anybody who's being fair, trust this president? Say, okay, we'll vote for this, we'll pass a new bill, when there are enough laws on the books right now to secure the borders, to make sure that people don't come in illegally. There's thousands of laws that are not being enforced. So why would the president, this president who is now setting up refugee camps for children from Central America in this country, who's refusing to deport people, criminals have gone loose, why would anybody have enforce the border? Why would anybody have confidence that if we pass new laws, all of a sudden he'll say, yeah, I'll enforce them?
Well, let me give you two answers. First of all, you know, without getting into the politics of it, of those 11 million people, I would say that...
Well, I'm not talking about those 11. I'm talking about going forward.
But I would say the vast majority were admitted under the three previous presidents, Republican and democratic. So this is not about a particular president. It is about the unwillingness to enforce the laws that are on the books. You're absolutely right about that. But that was something that was a kind of an agreement, an unholy agreement perhaps, between the American business community and the federal government. Years ago, I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times where I pointed out that actually the Social Security Administration knows quite precisely where the illegals are. And every time they have tried to contact the employers that there's a problem with the fraudulent documentation that's been submitted, they got howls from the Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and from the immigrant advocacy groups. So the answer really is, at this point, I think that both left and right have to come together, and the deal would be this: really stringent enforcement. You're right, we have the laws on the books and we can strengthen those laws. This time, mean it when we talk about enforcement, but the quid pro quo is two things. One, the big issue that we're just talking about, what to do with the illegals. To me, more important than that is the criteria for admitting new immigrants. And again, I don't want to take too much time on that.
No, I think that's very important, because that's the problem that exists going forward.
Yeah, I argue that that immigrants are a key part of our human capital. So, saying that, I also argue that the higher the level of education and skills that they have, the greater their human capital contribution. That has not been part of American immigration policy. We essentially have an immigration policy that favors relatives of people that are already in the United States. Many of them are fine people, and many of them do have skills and education, but the vast majority do not. And so I argue that we should, like Canada, have an immigrant admissions policy that is a little bit like a college admissions policy, that the greater your education, the greater your level of skills, the more work experience you've had, and the better you speak English, or in the case of Canada, English and French, that the more likely you will be admitted.
And no affirmative action in that admission process, similar to universities?
Well, most of the immigrants will actually come from these affirmative action categories anyway.
Right.
We're going to still get.
I'm just joking.
I know, but the applicants are going to come from Mexico and Central America, and they're going to come from East and South Asia. We're not going to get too many immigrants applying from Europe. We may get some. So it'll be a kind of natural affirmative action anyway. It wouldn't change the ethnic composition of our immigrants. It would raise the human capital of our immigrants.
Well, let me ask you about this this notion that we need high-skilled immigrants to take jobs. There was a study done by the Center for Immigration Studies that looked at 2007 to 2012 and says that there is no shortage of high-tech workers in the U.S. In fact, they say, according to their figures, every year there were 105,000 high-tech jobs created, and we let into the country 129,000 of those skilled immigrants, and we here in this country graduate 115,000 high-tech students. So so there's more people. There's enough U.S. graduates to take those jobs, and if you bring in an influx of immigrants with that capability, you're just creating competition for the U.S. worker.
Well, let me disagree. First of all, I'm very familiar with that work, and I get every day or every couple of days I get blogs from that organization, so I did read that report. There's that fundamental fallacy. There's sort of the assumption that a lot of people have that we have a kind of an employment pegboard with a certain number of red holes for red pegs and green holes for green pegs, and that it's fixed. And I argue, in terms of the economic research that I've done and top experts on human capital, that the pegboard isn't fixed. The higher the level of skills in the society, the more the job market itself gets transformed. We don't have a fixed number of high-tech jobs or high education jobs that we then have to fill
so
with the company.
The more high-skilled workers, then the more jobs will be available?
That's right. In fact, a lot of jobs get transformed. I mean, if we look at the mix of high-tech and low-tech jobs, they're not at all uniform around the world. If this were some kind of a natural distribution, they'd be the same everywhere.
Right.
But wealthy advanced, rich, modern countries like the United States or France or Canada or Japan have a radically different mix of jobs because they have a radically different mix of human capital skills.
Let me ask you very quickly, we have a minute left. This humanitarian crisis, as it's being called by many, these kids coming from Central America, but their parents dumping them, hiring people to bring them across the border, then now they're in camps, they're even moving camps up north. How does that stop? How do we stop that in 30 seconds?
We have to get tough. I mean, this is one case where, this is a kind of a new loophole that emerged. I say close it as quickly as possible. Maybe we have to work with the governments of Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras, but to have them repatriated humanely. Yeah. But we can't allow this to continue.
Peter, great to talk to you always. Whether I agree or disagree, you're a fountain of information and you know your stuff inside out. And I really appreciate it. And folks, the book, The Smart Society, Peter Smsalins, also professor of political science at Stony Brook. When we come back, Give me 5. Don't miss it.